Welcome to the Protecting Your Retirement Radio Show, right here on Talk Radio 640 WGST. Are you frustrated with the ups and downs of the stock market? Not sure how to invest your hard-earned retirement money? Each week, we'll look at the money-saving tips you need to know to have a successful retirement. Now, from the heart of Buckhead, here's your host, wealth coach, and financial advisor, David Nicholas.
All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the show. We appreciate you being with us today for another week of Protecting Your Retirement. We had a great show last week. We had great guests with us. If you want to check out the show, just go to nicholaswealth.com, and we've got a list of all our great interviews that we've had over the last couple of weeks as Americans, whether it's financial, whether it's political. So this week's, I'm excited. We've got with us Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, and most of us know Allen West. He started a 22-year career in the United States Army. He served in several combat zones in Desert Storm, Iraqi Freedom. He was also a battalion commander in Afghanistan. But in 2010, Mr. West was honored to continue his oath of service to his country, where he's actually elected to the United States Congress out of Florida's 22nd District. You may have seen him on Fox News as a contributor. He's a senior fellow to the London Center of Policy and Research, but he also has a book out called The Guardian of the Republic, An American Ronin's Journey to Faith, Family, and Freedom. Mr. West, thanks so much for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Dave. And you forgot the most important thing is that I'm a native Atlantan and a graduate of Henry Grady High School.
You know, that's right. You are. You know, it's funny. I think me and you kind of switched spots. So I actually grew up in Broward County in South Florida, and then I moved to Atlanta. So I think we're the opposite here. But that's right. You are a native. George grew up here in the Atlanta area, and I don't know. I don't know if there's any way we can get you back home here at some point. But I know Georgians would love to have you here.
Well, I don't mind coming back home. As a matter of fact, I was just home recently to speak at Dr. Michael Yusuf's Church of the Apostles for his Patriot service right before 4th of July, and it was a great honor to be there.
Well, it was a great sermon. It's funny that you mentioned. I want to talk to you about one of the points that you made during that sermon as we go on here. But I just want to start. Let's start with the border. I think that's the number one issue that is pressing right now for Americans. You know, we've got a situation at the border. We've got all these children, immigrants coming over the border. Now, the president's solution to that is it kind of seems to throw money at it, but it seems that he's refused to actually go down to the border and see the situation itself. Is money going to help this issue? Is there another solution that we need here at the border?
Well, the money is not going to help the solution to the tune of $3.7 billion, especially when you see the breakdown of it. Why do we need to, once again, since this is a financial show, to borrow more money in order for us to throw money at a situation which, screams for one simple thing. Let's secure the border first and foremost. Most of the money, that $3.7 billion, is going over to the Department of Health and Human Services, which tells you that we're not going to solve the crisis or solve the problem. It's just going to be so that we can take care of these individuals that we're going to seemingly allow into the country. And you hear the lexicon being changed where we're not saying illegal immigrants anymore. People are starting to say refugees. And why do we need to spend millions of dollars sending it to Central American countries for them to run a public relations campaign? So when you're talking about this $3.7 billion, you're talking about American taxpayer money that is, going to be borrowed, or you're going to have to increase taxes in order for that to happen. And that's just not what we need to be doing at a point in time when we should be concerned about our own children here in the United States of America and the lack of them enjoying the future American dream.
I think that's spot on. I mean, it's $3.7 billion. That's Americans footing the bill for that large price tag. Well, another big ruling, I just want to jump over to Supreme Court. So recently the Supreme Court just ruled in favor of Hobby Lobby. It was for a win for religious freedom when it comes to privately held corporations. But the question I get, and I hear it, I see it on Facebook, I see it on social media, you've got liberals. Well, let me ask it a different way. What would prevent, let's just say it is a woman working for a company that they did not necessarily provide the birth control that she wanted. What would prevent her from going out to just say Walgreens or someone else to actually get the contraceptive that she would need? Is something stopping her from doing that?
No, you're absolutely right. And again, this is about the dependency society that liberal progressives want to, perpetuate. So when you look at what Hobby Lobby in that decision says, first of all, the Supreme Court says a closely held private sector company, which means that I believe, a majority of the stock is owned by a family, is their beliefs. And in this free market, they tell you exactly what the benefits you're going to get. Hobby Lobby provides 16 different forms of birth control coverage. There are 4 very specific that they were against covering because it promotes abortion, which goes against that family's values. 3 of them are a drug, and 1 of them is a device. So you're asking the right question. The question is, what precludes a woman from going out and getting those other 4 on her own? You cannot, supersede and override the First Amendment, religious freedom rights, and the free exercise of religion thereof for American citizens. And when you look at some of the liberal media outlets, they are completely distorting that decision whatsoever. And now you have Harry Reid and others and the Democrats up on Capitol Hill, trying to bring up legislation that is going to force the issue on these private sector closely held companies that the Supreme Court just ruled on. So, again, here you have the Supreme Court doing what they're supposed to do, interpreting the law based upon the rule of law, our Constitution, and that's still not good enough for the liberal progressive left.
It's interesting. Yeah, you said the word. It's a symptom of a dependency society. That's interesting. I was looking, and I think it was in your book that I saw, but the left went apocalyptic recently. Apoplectic. Yeah, when you, I think they would want the end of the world too with that kind of statement. But when you use the word enslavement to describe the welfare state, I'll quote you. You said, "To me, it's worse than physical enslavement because it enslaves human spirit. It destroys the will and determination to seek improvement in a better life." I love that quote. Can you expand on that just a little bit more for our listeners?
Well, it's very simple. All you have to do is look at the inner city neighborhoods. Look at my neighborhood where I grew up in, the old 4th Ward in Atlanta, Georgia, where you had families, you had kids that were, focused on a better way of life. No one wanted to be, receiving government checks. As a matter of fact, I will tell you that we used to kind of make fun of those who were in Section 8 housing because, we had mothers and fathers that, got out there and scrunched together and worked hard, and they had their own homes. I mean, my home is, it's been sold, but it's 651 Kennesaw Avenue. But when you look at the inner cities and what the welfare nanny state and what the failures of the Great Society programs of Lyndon Johnson, it has taken away that sense of education, entrepreneurship, and self-reliance, which were the 3 pillars of Booker T. Washington's program, away from the black community. And so you see these failing inner cities, being in Detroit, being in Chicago, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C., and that has created a new 21st century economic plantation, and it is an enslavement of the will, the spirit, the drive, and determination that makes America unique because it squanders that individual, motivation to get out there and do better. So I think that it is, somewhat worse than physical enslavement, and I think that you see it on the streets in America.
Well, and let's just talk about the black community just a little bit. And, growing up, I mean, you said right where you grew up here in inner city Atlanta. Let's talk about gun violence or gun homicide violence specifically. And I had this argument recently with an individual, but when it comes to violence, when it comes to these homes, are we suffering from a cultural issue, or is it just a symptom of what some would say too many guns in the wrong hands?
Well, I think it is a cultural issue whereby, the violence is somewhat glorified. I mean, in the inner city, you hear it in the rap music. You see this gangster culture that has arisen. You see this gang culture that has popped up. Just look at what happened over the last weekend in Chicago over 4th of July Independence Day weekend, where you had upwards of about 16 deaths and close to 60 to 65 wounded in shootings in Southside Chicago. That used to not be the case. And so we have a cacophony of issues that have come together to create this sense of gang violence, the breakdown of the family, the lack of educational opportunities, failing schools, the lack of small business development and growth, the lack of the input and the importance of the church in the black community. So all of those things have come together, and we have had the rise of negative forces, cultural forces, to include gangs, the rap gangster culture, things of that nature, that has led to this culture of violence, especially in the inner city. We just got to get back to the basics. That's all.
It seems simple, right? Just to get back to the basics,
faith, family, and freedom.
That's exactly, folks. We are talking to Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. Colonel Allen West is a congressman out of Florida's 22nd district, distinguished 22-year career in the United States Army. Colonel, another question that I have for you. You brought up when you spoke at the Church of the Apostles, you talked about this concept of separation of church and state, and you frankly said, guys, it does not exist. Can you expand on that just a little bit more and tell our listeners that it really doesn't exist and where that misconception came from?
Well, it doesn't exist how the modern day progressive socialists want to define it, as a separation of the Judeo-Christian faith heritage from the fabric of American culture and society. What separation of church and state was, and you can go back and see, was a letter that was written by Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist Convention, which is up in Connecticut at the time, Danbury, Connecticut, that said that here in America they did not want to have an established religion, and they did not want to have a head of state who was also a head of church. They wanted to have a clear separation, which is in opposition to what you saw in England with the king being the head of the state and also the head of the Church of England. It was never meant to be an eradication of our faith belief. And notice I didn't say religion, I said faith belief. And so what you end up having here in the United States of America is a movement, a secular humanist movement, to eradicate faith and belief, completely and totally. We in the military now, we have chaplains that have been told they cannot pray in the name of Jesus. We have, people getting upset with, Christmas decorations, and you can't even say Christmas and Merry Christmas in some aspect. You have to say winter solstice or happy holidays and things of this nature. So that's my concern, is that when we don't understand these fundamental principles, it's very easy for people to come along and change language. Look at in California right now, where now they have signed into law that marriage is no longer, you don't use the terms husband and wife, you just say spouse one and spouse two. And that's how you slowly but surely lose a sense of who you are.
And, when we look across the globe, we do see some governments where you have a caliphate or a religious system in the government, which is obviously something the founders never intended. But when it comes to those countries, for example, I've always said, especially some of these Muslim nations, and we've got about a minute and a half, it's probably not even enough time to grasp this issue, but when it comes to some of these nations, I've always said, look, especially when it comes to Muslim nations, I have no problem with the majority of Muslims that don't necessarily follow their religion. I have a problem with the violent minority that does. I think most of Americans understand that. Is the president misguided on this reality?
Well, I think the president has more of an Eastern orientation. I grew up, looking at SEC football and, cheering on the Atlanta Braves and selling Cokes at the old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, as well as Grant Field for Georgia Tech. So I think that your early formative years have a lot to do with the perspectives you and insights you have globally. And I think that is what's causing the president to have a very naive view and somewhat a very anti-American, anti-colonial view. When he removed the bust of Winston Churchill, one of his first things was a clear indicator. So we have to, understand and study the Islamic culture and understand the precepts and concepts in the Quran, in the Hadith, in the Surah, so that we can better understand our adversaries and realize that there was a turn in Islam in about 622 A.D. when Muhammad conducted what is called the Hijrah. He left Mecca and went out to Medina, and the verses in the Quran as well as his actions became very violent. And there are those who follow that post-622 A.D., and that's what we find ourselves being confronted against.
Well, folks, we are talking to Colonel Alan West. Mr. West, I can't say thank you enough for your time, for joining with us today. I know our listeners got a lot out of it. I want to get into your book. Folks, if you want a great read, go out and get Guardian of the Republic, An American Ronin's Journey to Faith, Family, and Freedom. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. I'm sure in local bookstores. Any other areas that our listeners can go and check out what you're involved in with, Mr. West?
Yes, you go to our website, alanbwest.com. That's Alan with 2 L's and an E, middle initial B as in boy, WEST. And, every day I put out about, 4 to 5 little op-ed pieces on news of the day.
All right, folks, that is Alan B. West. Mr. West, we appreciate your time. You are a patriot, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, David, for all you do, and God bless.
All right, folks, don't go anywhere. After we come back from the break, we're going to talk about the markets. We've had an interesting week so far on the markets, but we're also going to talk about going forward with the market at all-time highs, what you can do now to make sure you're allocated properly. Folks, we'll see you right after the break. I'm David Nicholas. We'll see you then.